So again, we are looking at this whole structure, the structure of the whole book, and we're noticing that each of these chapters, the 5 stories at the beginning of the book and the 5 stories at the end of the book, answer to one another, as we learned, if you remember, from the structure that we gleaned from David Gooding. So we're looking at chapter 5, the end of the first half of the book now, and chapters 10 to 12. And you may recall that this chapter here was about Belshazzar. So if we look at that real quickly, we'll remind ourselves that Belshazzar was given to pleasure and was going to have a time of basically a party, an orgy, with his lords and wives and concubines and so on, and they were going to drink, but they weren't content to just get drunk. They wanted to get drunk out of the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple of the house of God in Jerusalem. They're directly mocking and taunting Yahweh. And as you know, the hand comes out and writes onto the wall, and he can't interpret it, and Daniel eventually comes to interpret it. And when he interprets what it means in the end that your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. And Belshazzar that very night was killed. So it was the time of the end for Belshazzar and for the Babylonian Empire. That kingdom ended at the end of the first half of the book, and Belshazzar went down for his mockery and taunting of God and directly challenging God. He acted blasphemously and egregiously so, and therefore he bore responsibility for that and was killed. On the other side was, of course, Daniel. And Daniel, we see here, was clothed with purple, a chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be third ruler in the kingdom. In other words, Daniel was exalted, and Daniel was saved and delivered, and he lived with the rewards of his work under Babylon. Even though the kingdom collapsed, he still had, some nice purple clothes and a chain of gold, and had some wealth to take with him. And he lived, and he outlived that kingdom. So when we come to the end of the book, the final vision, we learn about another king who is particularly blasphemous as he comes into the beautiful land. That's the land of Israel, the land of the temple, which is the thing that is the beautiful. And he's going to, like Belshazzar, he's going to become a ruler of the treasures of gold and silver, and he, of course, will mock God. We learn about that earlier. He pays no attention to the gods of his fathers, but he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses, meaning of security. Remember, Belshazzar was in a fortress and had those palace walls, the fortress walls, protecting him. And here we're told that this final evil, blasphemous king at the end of history will similarly worship security, worship the power and the wealth to control and to be in control and have total security. And of course, he's taunting God. He's acting blasphemously. And he too, then, at the time of the end, he too will be put down and destroyed by God. And at that time, it's not just the case that Daniel will live beyond the end of the Babylonian Empire. Here we're told that the nation, at that time your people shall be delivered, and every one whose name shall be found written in the book, and many of those who sleep, that is, who have died, shall sleep in the dust of the earth, shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So there's a great resurrection at the end of the second half of the book, because this isn't just the end of the Persian Empire or the end of the Greek Empire or even the Roman Empire. It's the end of all Gentile governments and nations across the earth. The divine figure has come to judge the whole world, and the blasphemous king will be put down like Belshazzar, and judged and killed, and Israel will be delivered. They will repent and turn to the divine figure for salvation, and they will be delivered. And there is then the great resurrection, where people who've died as believers throughout these various stages of history and have lived all through that and reacted well, have not been faithless, but in their faith and in their confidence have looked to God and to this time of the end for deliverance and vindication, will be raised from the dead, and they will outlive. They will live while all the other nations perish and die. And of course, at the very end, God says to Daniel, he says, "You shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place," the word for inheritance, your allotted place at the end of the day. So he shall get his inheritance. And remember where he had that gold chain and some clothes, and he had some rewards with him. As he survived the Babylonian Empire, so he will have an inheritance and rewards as he's raised from the dead at the time of the end and enters into his rest and stands just as he stood on earth. He'll stand confidently and with great blessing in his inheritance. One final question for the final vision of the book, and it's the final question for this reading guide of the whole book of Daniel, which is, what's the significance of the divine figure here being above the river? It mentions it twice, that he is above the waters of the river. What's the point of that? Why is that emphasized? And how might that have helped Daniel and his faith as you come to the final vision and the final revelation God ever gave, the final encouragement God ever gave to Daniel? So you can work on that. Best wishes to you, and we'll see you next time.